Welcome to Soundbites. I'm Alex Milstein, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Joe Bell here from Notch Realty in Anchorage, Alaska. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, so today we're talking about a topic that I've been asked many questions about, and that is succession planning. So before we get too far into it, tell us a little bit more about what succession planning is.
So for me and my approach, succession planning is the successful transition of a business, right? Whether it's looking at it and approaching it for yourself in stepping out of the business, or looking at it as bringing in business and what that looks like. So we've been through both iterations and we can speak to both sides, but succession planning is ultimately the successful handoff, if you will, of one business to another with minimal hiccups. I don't know if that's completely achievable, but we do our best to make it a smooth transition.
Great. And so when someone starts thinking about transitioning out of the business, what do you, I guess tell us a little bit more about what should they start thinking about? Like, is there a timeline that you start thinking about? Like, where does someone start if they're sort of getting to a point where they're saying, you know what, I've had a great run and I'm ready to move on with my life, but I have this great book of business that I don't want to just leave them hanging. So how do you, like, walk us through what are some ideas?
Yeah, so ideally the more time the better. Hopefully we don't end up in a scenario where it's a have to for one reason or another. Really the best way to approach it is to get super focused on the economic side of your business and financially understanding what it looks like, right? We all go through this. We put blood, sweat, and tears into it. Hopefully not much blood, not much tears, but there's a lot that goes into building a business over the years. And, unfortunately, not a lot of real estate professionals are setting themselves for after the transactions. So it's getting real finite on what your business looks like and what it's worth. In most cases, what we've seen is not a lot of individuals, more so teams, but not a lot of individuals are prepared financially to put out a bunch of money to purchase somebody's book of business, if you will. So in approaching stepping out of your business, you need to look at really what is the value? What do the finances look like? Where does your sphere come from? Because the big challenge that we've run into is somebody stepping out of the business and just they're gone. Doesn't work so well unless you have some sort of corporate referral source or some sort of network that is just working along and it's handing it off to somebody else to oversee it. In most cases, your sphere has come to love and respect who you are. And so in most successful handoffs, really it's about the relationship and how do you find the right person to receive and harness those relationships as you step out of the business. So it takes some time, and you should also be considering that an extra 6 to 8 months in the industry still is going to behoove both parties receiving, right, and successing. So the more time, the merrier. And, we've been through a couple where it's, hey, we're a year out. Hey, we're a couple years out. And those have been a lot better than, oh, crap, I've got to get out of the business right now. Here it is. Take it and run. Does that make sense?
It does. So you bring up a really good point regarding time, because that's the one thing that, I've over the years have heard, and I've had other brokers who've approached me and said, hey, I'm thinking about getting out, but I still have another 3, 4, 5 years. How much planning do you have to, if you're thinking about selling your business, how much planning, how much in advance do you have to actually get out there and start planning this?
Yeah, so if you can have a 2-year kind of countdown, because What you're going to want to really focus on as you're moving forward is the who, right? I mean, in business in general, it's the who. So finding the right person, and a lot of times you have someone in mind, and it's harboring that relationship, having a lot of conversations ahead of time to plan it out, what it looks like, and really dive into the specifics, because there's a ton of pieces that go into this. It seems like it would be pretty straightforward, but there are a ton of pieces that go into this. And one of the more successful strategies is the potential of working side by side with somebody for, shoot, if you can, 3-6 months ahead of time, and then it's a much easier transition. Or when you're looking to hire some help, have it in your mind that this could be the next person to run this business forward in the future, and really carry it in a manner that is going to, one, financially provide for both parties, and two, is just going to be a really good fit with your sphere of influence. And so that doesn't come easy. It just unfortunately doesn't. And so the more time, but I would expect, around the 2-year mark, you should be taking some steps and looking at activities to find the right person. And then from there, it's a lot easier to piece by piece be able to hand it over.
And what would you say is the best way to identify that person? So how are there personality tests that you provide somebody? Like how do you go about finding that right person?
Yeah, I mean, the DISC personality assessment to help you understand who you are and who you work best with, right? And I think Abelson does that one. And you could dive into any of them out there that you're familiar with, but it is more key to understand first how you operate, and then take into consideration where your sphere comes from, because the resource is a really big piece. If it's just folks from networking because you're more of a high I personality, you like to be social, well, having someone who is more attached to the details ultimately be good for your business, but might not be able to connect in the same manner. So you are, in essence, almost replacing yourself with an upgrade. and that's hard for a lot of us, right? Because we're all ego and prideful, and we built this business from the ground up. So taking a step back and just truly understanding who you are, how you operate, and what value you provide to your sphere is going to give you a head start in kind of finding and attracting, who that talent is that can come in and do a really good job for everybody.
Sure. And do you post an ad on Indeed, Craigslist, like how, Monster, like how do you go about finding that person? Do you want somebody who already is in the real estate business and has experience in a transaction? Or do you want somebody who's off the street who's never sold a property before?
For me, I like there to be some experience or some excitement around real estate. What I have found is, right, you have Sally Joe, who's been in the real estate industry for 14 years and has her good friend Sue, right? And she's like, oh, this is a supernatural handoff to Sue. Well, Sue might be a really good friend, but might not be the ideal individual. So you have to be careful that folks aren't stuck in their ways, or if they are stuck in their ways, they're stuck in the ways that you want to see your business handled moving forward. Too many times we hear about these friendships that blow up because one book of business is handed over and it's not the right person, it's not the right fit, but it's a good friend, and they could use the extra funds. Here's some income. That's all BS. You shouldn't approach it that way at all. So for me, I like to focus on folks that are already in the industry. It's a much easier conversation. There is a grooming aspect to this. So if you would prefer to bring someone in, at the ground level, teach them everything, that's going to be a 2-year process in itself just to get them up and running, and hopefully they pan out. So that's why I would focus on somebody more with some experience, has some good energy around them, has some of the respect of the peers in the industry. Maybe you've done a deal with them or been involved with them in something, whether it's a culture activity within your own brokerage, or like I said, doing a deal, across the way with them, just so you have a good feel of who they are. And again, this is not a process that we take lightly. So this isn't, hey, yeah, I've done a couple of deals with, Joe, and he seems like a good guy. Let's go ahead and toss the business over to him. There is qualification, there is time spent together, because the individual that is successing, right, and moving out of the business, they're just going to have to be okay with spending some time in the process, in the transition, so that it is a good handoff and everybody wins moving forward.
And one of the things, so does it have to be someone that's local? So let's just say there's another agent that's across the country that just moved to Anchorage and has been successful, let's just say in Boston, and now wants to acquire or be acquired by somebody to take over their business. Does it have to be someone that's local, or could it be somebody that just has the real estate experience?
I think in this day of age where expansion is a really big conversation, it's kind of sexy. You have technology that helps a lot in that aspect. That's a easy, simple part of the equation. But if I'm homegrown here and I'm looking for folks to really connect with the individual I'm going to be handing off to, I want them to know the area. And again, this could be a year-long process of this individual moving into town. I like them. They make sense for me. They make sense for my sphere. And so more or less just getting them involved in the community and better understanding how the community operates and who's in the community and so on and so forth, I think could be very beneficial. And so I definitely wouldn't cut that person off by any means. If they are if they're the right fit, then we should be willing to put the time and effort into that person to see it through. Because at the end of the day, it's how do I provide value to our sphere versus how do I make the most money for me once I step out.
Well, and you mentioned the word money. So let's talk about finances. How do finances work in a succession plan? How does it all come together?
Yeah, so it's somewhat across the board. For a lot of folks, when they first start talking about getting out of the business, they assume that they're going to be able to take their book of business and get paid for it. Just not the case. Nobody, I shouldn't say nobody. There are few instances where somebody's going to go, okay, you've been generating 6 million in production the last 6 years. And so you're grossing 180, you've got, 40% in expenses, and break it all down and go, here's a check. Like, it just doesn't happen. I think there are some brokerages out there that might be doing something like that, but the individual licensee or team just stroking a $50,000, $100,000 check for the potential of business, we just don't see it a whole lot. And so really it more so breaks down into almost a referral program. That's what I've seen works the best. It's for the first 3 years, here's the percentages. And we've seen where they start out as, let's say, a 50-50, and then there's benchmarks. So in year 3, we move to a 30%, year 5, we move to a 15%, and by year 7, we're done. Now, that's a really long-ranged plan, but just to give an idea of percentages and numbers. And for me, if I'm truly providing value to the individual that is stepping out of the business, that's their legacy. That's a really big deal to them. It's a big deal to their family. It's a big deal for retirement. I like to see, it might be smaller percentages on the way out, but it could be for a lot longer, because ultimately at the end of the day, the smaller percentages aren't going to impact hugely, but it could impact the agent going out in a really big way. So that's the commission divide. And I've found that the referral approach is a lot easier. Now, when it comes to monthly expenses, for me, I'm going to expect the successing agent, the agent stepping out, to continue to carry some of those expenses until we get some deals in the pipeline and we know that this looks to be a very positive transition. So I'm not ultimately taking on all the risk because this is a give and take relationship. And so what we have set up is, after deal 5, where we've built up some funds and now we can comfortably take over, the database payments, if there's any marketing going on, and some of those expenses, just start to roll it in, because we're seeing like it's going to, it's looking like it's going to be a really good situation for us.
Well, this is really great information. As people are starting to plan about succession, how do you have somebody else take over? This is really good info. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us, Joe. And
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm Alex Milstein, and this has been another episode of Soundbites. Thanks for joining us.